Welcome to the ABCs of Horses, a Big Blend radio podcast featuring Christy Wood, a world champion horse trainer, a carded horse show judge, an equestrian expert, and an author. Welcome, everyone. Today we are tackling the G's, the goats, right now. We're talking about gear and tack for horse owners, and I think this is important because you can spend a lot of money on it, but do you know what you're going to do? You get your first horse, okay, and then you go, okay, I'm going to get a saddle. How do you even pick out a saddle? And then, do you want English? Do you want Western? Are you doing it for trail riding, or are you doing it just to hang out with your horse in your backyard, literally? What are you doing? Are you going to show? That's a whole other thing. And then how to care for it. That's a whole other thing. And then what about, okay, spurs, bits, pads. Yeah, there's all kinds of things. I even remember getting blankets for our horses in winter in South Africa, believe it or not. Yes, we gave them blankies because when it got really cold and wet, it was good for them. But that's just where we were in the area. So as always, Christy Wood is back on the show, and welcome back, Christy. Are you ready to talk about gear and tack?
Yes, I am, Lisa. I'm ready to go.
Okay, so what about that? You finally get your horse, your dream horse, and now you have to know what you're buying a saddle for. We should start there, right? Saddle, bridles, bits, all of it.
Right. So let's start with the word tack just to make sure people understand what we're talking about. I've had people come up to me and say tackle. No, I'm not talking about tackle. That's for fishing. Tack is a general term we use for any kind of horse gear that we're going to use on our horse to make our job easier for guiding them, securing them, and enjoying a ride. So tack is just a general term for horse gear.
So for horse gear itself. So that means the bridle, the bit, the saddle, the spurs, all of that.
Right. So yes, you bought your first horse. That's really great. You need some basic essentials at first, and you're going to need brushes. And there's different types of brushes. They're softer and harder depending on the hair coat and the time of year of what type of brushes you'll use on your horse. Obviously, we have some shedding blades when they shed in the wintertime that are sometimes heavier bristled, which would definitely irritate a horse's skin in the summertime when they have their short summer coat. So we need to know what type of brush. It's good to have multiple types of brushes because your horse will shed twice a year. And then a hoof pick. We need to keep those hooves clean. Get a good one that fits well in your hand, that has a nice point to it to dig out rocks and foreign objects that we don't want to leave in our horse's hooves before we ride them. And a good, of course, rope or nylon halter, and there's different types of halters as well to lead your horse and lead ropes. There's cotton ropes and nylon ropes. The nylon, personally, I prefer cotton over the nylon because the nylon can be a little slick and can slide through your hands very quickly, and that can also leave you with a rope burn if you don't release quick enough. And I just prefer the cotton ropes. They're also a little bit heavier for securing your horse as well. And then again, the two types of halters are nylon and rope. Some people prefer the rope halters that tie on, kind of the old cowboy style looking rope, but I actually prefer nylon because they're more structured and stay more secure to the horse's face. Plus, in lunging a horse or tying, even in a trailer, it just is more secure with the buckles. And I just like the security of the nylon halter.
This is interesting, yeah, because then, you're talking about all these extra parts beyond the saddle, right? We'll get to the saddle. But, I remember getting things like like a fly fringe for the horses because of all the flies. And I mean, I don't know.
Oh, Lisa, you're dating yourself now. Yes, the fly fringes were out.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Hey, I did just turn 50, y'all. I'm middle-aged now officially.
Actually, there's still
so
some.
I can date myself as much as I want.
That's okay. There are still some fly, what you just call it, the leather pieces that actually can be attached to a halter or the brow band of a bridle. Some people like to ride with the fly fringe over the horse's eyes as they're riding, but
I wasn't doing as a riding. I was just for them out in the paddock
Yeah, the different
corral, as
ways.
you
There's
say.
just different ways. But today, we have some really, of course, with the big discovery of Velcro, we have these wonderful fly masks now that fit or actually have seams and darts and everything
Oh,
else that shape over the horse's eyes so the horses can truly see and be more
oh, I've
comfortable.
seen them. I just didn't realize. I know what you're
Yes.
talking about.
And then
Wow.
they've got fleece around where the eyes, excuse me, where the ears
Yeah.
go. So those are very, I really prefer those because it's just an easier, they stay on a little bit better. And I just,
Wow.
they're really nice. They're really very,
But
very nice.
that's important for horses. Just if you can do it, anything to
Well,
alleviate it,
I don't
right?
know any place in on this world so far that I have seen that doesn't have flies when it's warm. And the flies love to chew around moisture, and the horse's
Hmm.
eyes are the perfect feeding area
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
for them. So you need to protect your horse's eyes and prevent them from just rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. And that can even cause a problem if they start rubbing against,
Yes.
wood or trees. They're going to, scrape their skin and create even more of an issue. So you really need to have those eyes protected in the summertime from the flies. And these fly
Mhm.
masks are really great. And yes,
Do
getting back to fly spray,
Well,
definitely.
I wanted to say, like, do you groom when you groom? Like, I used to always kind of wash out my horse's eyes, like just kind of with a damp, cloth, kind of like, hey, you're running eyes, let me clean them out, a little bit. And is that okay to do?
Well, certainly if they have uh, some matter that is built up in their eyes, probably from them rolling in the dirt for whatever reason. Hopefully, it's not an indicator that the horse has a sickness problem or a different problem with the eyes. But actually, this fly mask prevent that. Most of the time, when I take my fly masks off, my horses don't
Hmm.
have any residual matter in their eyes because of the mask, but they
Hmm.
can still roll and get dust and dirt through the little tiny squares of that fly mask. So what your horse would appreciate would be, yes, maybe a damp cloth or even a soft brush to brush down over the eyes just to give them a nice little extra itchy and scratchy to make them feel really good. Remove the dust and dirt that could fall down into their eyes when you take the mask off. But fly
Hmm.
repellent's excellent. You need to put that on your hand, wipe that down. You can put it on a soft cloth, wipe it down. I keep saying down over the horse's eyes. You never want to take a spray bottle and spray up into the horse's eyes or nostrils. You're always spraying away from the eyes and protect your horse's face from that. And then fly spray
Hmm.
is good for the legs and the shoulders and the hips. You don't want to spray where the saddle's going to go. There's no point in doing that. And that just creates more possible irritation underneath the saddle pad when you're riding. But fly repellent's important in the summertime. Yes.
So now, as we get into fall season, as we record this, and and people listen anytime, but um, the weather's going to change depending on where you are. Now, fall in Montana might start getting a little bit of, really chilly and getting into winter. So when I brought up that about the little blankies that we would give our horses, we had like winter blankies. Now, it's probably a different term and different thing now because am I dating myself again, or
Oh,
is
no,
that a
not at
good
all.
thing?
Blankies maybe would be your term for what you put on your horse, but they're just called a horse blanket. And
Okay.
there are many types of blankets. Let's just talk about blankets in general first. Mother Nature has equipped these wonderful horses with the ability to produce a beautiful long winter coat to keep them warm. They are also able to repel water during rain and winter months. Now, everything can change. I live in California, so you folks in Montana are going to think I'm probably crazy for what I talk about because I don't have severe snow. I don't have 5-foot drifts of snow. But every horse that I have here, even in California, has a barn or a lean-to or a cover that they can go in and eat their food and have a dry area to stand. And if you give that horse that choice, they will go and they'll complete their meal and their hay in a dry place. And if they choose to walk out and stand in the rain, then they can, because Mother Nature has given them that ability to propel what Mother Nature gives in rain and snow and even in heat. But the blankets, almost, if you're not showing your horse, and that's different. If you're showing your horse, we want to protect the horse's hair coat more. We want to prevent maybe the growth of longer hair if we're showing through the fall months and even into the early spring. The horses can take care of the extreme elements if they're not too extreme on their own. So when you start to blanket a horse, you're actually going to interfere with their ability to grow a longer coat and to protect themselves. So when you make that commitment to put a blanket on a horse, you need to pretty much stay with that, realizing that you've just shortened the length of the hair that's possibly going to grow if you start blanketing your horse.
Wow.
There's just a lot of different variables to that. And there are some waterproof blankets that are produced out there. I haven't seen a waterproof blanket that's 100% waterproof. And I'm saying that when we've had extreme cases of 10 straight days of an atmospheric river, which California experienced a few years ago, that we have never seen. So the blankets are going to get soaked. Even the waterproof blankets, rain is still going to get in here and there. And if you get your horse's body gets wet and you leave that blanket on, we're talking, now we're talking problems. You wouldn't stay outside in the rain if your clothes are soaked. You come in, you take them off, you get into dry clothes. The same can happen with a horse. You don't want to leave those horses completely soaked with a wet blanket on. So you have to monitor a lot of what you're doing. You have to make your commitment to, yes, lock your horse up in a stall so they can't go out and maybe stand in the rain with that wet blanket. If you're going to have, 10 days of solid rain, you've got to monitor what you're doing and how you control your horse's environment.
Wow. This is so fascinating because it's really true. And when I think back to South Africa, there's no way it was as cold as like where we were earlier this winter when we started this podcast with you up in St. Joseph, right? Remember that?
Yes.
We were up in the snow when we first talked to you, and St. Joseph goes back to the Chief Joseph Trail and Chief Joseph. That's that community. And that was cold. So now I'm thinking we didn't need those blankets.
So Lisa,
we just got sold them. That's interesting. So this is what's so important about this podcast, because we probably just got sold on doing it.
Well, so,
you know what I mean?
It's okay to monitor your horse. Again, give them a shelter to run into run into. They're called run-ins. But the horse can walk into and eat. If that horse has got really good nutritional food, you're giving it good hay, good grain throughout the winter, they've got good body weight, they're going to produce that wonderful long hair coat. If they want to go out and stand in the snow the rest of the afternoon, even stand in the rain, that's fine. But then you'll feed them underneath that cover. They'll come in for their food and they'll have a chance to eat dry hay and be able to basically dry themselves if their coat gets wet. Mother Nature gives them that ability to take care of all that if they're fed well. So that's another thing you have to monitor. Now, if you have an older horse that comes in and eats and he goes out and stands in the snow and you go out for the evening feed and you call that horse in and it comes in and it's shaking like crazy. If I see a horse that's shaking, that horse is going to be locked in a stall. I'm not going to give them the freedom to go out and stand in that rain again. No. I'm going to put them in a dry place where as they eat, their body heat's going to dry themselves. They can dry. We'll stop the shaking.
When that happens, do you go in and start rubbing them down like with a towel or something to get that moisture off?
Yes, but their body heat will naturally, yes, if they're soaked, they're really dripping soaked. Yes, I'm going to towel them off, but I'm not going to put a blanket on you because they're still wet.
Yeah, no, you don't do it.
Their body will dry them basically from the inside out, producing body heat as they eat, and they'll dry. Now, if I have an older horse that is now dry, she's gonna have a blanket put on her. And I have an older horse here, and that's the one I'm trying to explain this to folks, is she's an older horse. She's 28. So she's going to get a nice little quilted blanket once she's dry, and then she's going to stay in that stall until the rain subsides. And she's going to have a
care of the elders
place, because older horses have to work sometimes a little extra hard or harder to dry themselves and to stay warm. So you've got to monitor your old horse, their body weight, how they're handling the elements. She would love to stand out in the rain, but if she's shaking, she really hasn't made a good choice, in my opinion. So I'm going to help her, get her dry, lots of good feed, get her with a nice blanket on, and then I'm going to prevent her from going out and standing in that rain the rest of the storm.
And that's the thing. It's like owning a horse is being not just owning them financially. It's about being aware of weather. It's being aware of, do you have the right gear to take care of them? Right.
Right.
So going into ownership, I know you do a lot of consulting work, but is that part of it? Like actually, when you talk to someone wanting to buy a horse, is actually finding out, are they ready to own a horse?
Well, there's a lot to know. That's why it's
Hmm.
always good to take lessons first and work with a person that can tell you
Yeah.
and help you get ready for what you're going to need. Again, we talked about facilities in a few podcasts ago
Hmm.
about boarding and what you would like to have for your horse available with a stall or a paddock or a run-in area. And you've got to know that your horse is going to need cover. There's so many extreme weather conditions that are happening
Oh, yes. Right now it's
lately that
insane.
you need to be
Yeah.
prepared just about for everything. You have to have possibly higher ground in case of flooding. The extreme heat gets to horses as well. We've had warmer days here in California this year, more than we ever had before. And yes, the horses love to go out and stand and bake in the sun. But that evening, when you go to check on them, I've got white stripes of dried salt on my horses. They look like zebras. They've been sweating because it's so hot. Now they love that. They have a shelter they can go into. And if that's the case, if my horse is going to start standing out there in the sun a little more than I prefer, you just make sure they have fresh water. They also have salt licks. They've got to
Mm.
they have to replace those electrolytes that they're losing. And that's what she has. She's got stripes of white beads of salt on her back end. And that tells me that it was pretty warm today and she sweated quite a bit. So just you have to watch and make sure your horse is drinking enough water. Monitor how much water they have. That's a little difficult sometimes when you have a water tub that has a float on it because it'll
Mm.
always be at the top level. So how do you know how much your horse is really drinking? It's just, again, you've got to monitor how much water they drink. You have to wash. We're going to talk about pee. We talked about that before. Your horse urinates. Is that clear? Or is it dark
Mm.
yellow, which means your horse may have concentrated urine, which means they're not getting enough water. There's just so much you need to observe about horse ownership
Oh.
and know these things before you take on that responsibility. And
Mm.
that's what I'm here for.
Or I
I'm
have a
here to help
team.
everybody. That's
Have
why
a
we're doing
team.
this podcast.
Have a team with you to help with those things too. I mean, yeah, I think this is so important. I mean, I know we always go off topic like we just did, but it's all connected. It's all important. That you can have the gear, but if you don't be aware, you're not going to even know when to use the gear, right?
Right.
So, I want to touch on pads. I know that was something you wanted to touch on, and I do want to get into bits because I think bits are it's almost controversial about whether, how hard the bit is for the horse's mouth. So I
Yeah.
want to get into that. But since we talked about blankets or blankies, as we like to say over here, let's talk about pads because that's what's going under the saddle, right?
Yes. You pretty much should have a saddle pad under any type of saddle that you use because it's a cushion between the hard leather of a saddle and the horse's back. And so it makes the horse more comfortable. You want to protect their backs. You're going to do long trips, whether it's trail riding, endurance riding, even in the show arena. It's a good idea to always have a pad that fits your saddle correctly. English saddles have a pad that is completely shaped like that type of English saddle. And there's many different types and styles of English saddles. And then the Western saddles also just want to make sure that your pad's a little bit larger than your Western saddle to protect that horse's back. And every pad's going to be a little different. There's a half-inch pads, there's 3/4 inch pads, a full-inch pad, depending on how your horse's back is shaped. If they're round backed, we call it mutton withered, meaning very little backbone shows, then you probably need maybe a moderate thickness on that pad. You don't want a real thick one, but you'd use a thicker pad on a horse that maybe has a more protruding wither bone. An older horse whose backbone might be showing just a little bit, they've lost some muscle tone. So everything has to be taken into consideration on what type of pad and the thickness that you're going to use.
Does it go also about the saddle you're using? I mean, do you have English pads versus Western pads? I mean, according to the saddle being that way, or is it or not?
Yes, I just sort of said
Yeah,
that about the English.
yeah.
The
I just
pads
want to
are
make sure
shaped.
because
Yeah, if
it's
everybody
different.
knows what an English saddle looks like, they're called forward seat or a flat saddle. there are pads that fit those saddles exactly to the shape that they are, and that's perfect. That's what you need. Now, again, some horses have different conformation, meaning their wither bone might be higher, the back of their back bone might be a little higher in the back. You can get different lift pads to get a saddle more level on your horse, get more cushion, depending on if you're jumping. There's endurance saddles. There's just a lot you have to take into consideration when now what the use is going to be for your horse and what type of saddle you want.
I remember purchasing a saddle and the pad at the same time. Like that was so that we're matching. Is that normal? Is that like the normal practice to do? Like,
I don't see that happening too often. Sometimes saddles and pads.
I'm dating myself again, and I was
not really. But today there's so much variety that and really you don't know how your saddle is going to fit a horse. You really need to make sure that you measure your horse and measure your saddle to make sure that the saddle fits properly. Not every saddle is going to fit every horse's back. That's why you're going to have a variable change and difference in the thickness of your saddle pad to maybe fill in if it's a wider gullet for a quarter horse, a size horse, or an Arabian who might be a little more narrow. Then you'll have maybe a different thickness depending on how the saddle's going to fit, and you want to make sure that saddle fits properly too. So if you're going to a tack and feed store to buy a saddle, talk to the owner there. They'll be able to tell you how to measure that gullet to see if that's correct. Go measure your horse. Sometimes you're even lucky enough. There's some local tack stores in Tulare County here that will let you trailer your horse in, and they'll help you do some saddle fitting, which is wonderful. And even have an arena, you can go ride your horse to make sure the saddle fits. So those are things to consider. You just don't buy a saddle because it fits your rear end. You need to make sure it's going to fit your horse's back.
Or for the looks, because how many, so I want to go, I still want to get to the bits, right? Because to me, the bit thing is interesting, personally, but I want to go to the saddles because they're kind of like guitars in a way, right? So, I've got my music background and I would watch people buy a guitar just by the looks. And I would go, yeah, it's pretty. Can you play it? Does it work with you? Can you hold it? Does it fit your body? And I know this sounds weird, and I am not a guitarist. I'm a singer, but I played the guitar, right? And all I know is guitars also somehow have to fit your body a bit. You've got to kind of, I don't know, you've just got to have this comfort level, but they're not attached to you like a saddle is attached to a horse. But I would watch people go, oh, I'm buying this saddle because it's beautiful. And what wonderful leather work. Someone has done some amazing, you know what I'm talking about, all that. I mean, beauty. And they buy these saddles before they put the saddle before the horse.
That's why I say measuring is so important, and knowing the body type that your horse has. It's very, very important. There are horses that are shorter backed, that a standard saddle blanket that would go over the top of your pad. They used to sell them, and they used to be just 32 inches by 32 inches. Well, now they're much more elaborate. They're larger. There could be 34 by 34, 36 by 36. Well, if you have a short backed horse to where a 32 by 32 saddle blanket would fit them, they're going to get lost with a 36. And the pad that's even that large is actually, when the horse's hip moves, it's going to hit that pad, and then you're going to create an area. So you got to know your horse's shape. You need to do some measuring. You need to make sure.
Just like our own human bodies.
Right. So basically, if you go out and buy, they call them quarter horse bars or quarter horse trees, because quarter horses are larger, they're more muscular. You're going to get a wider gullet, which could be even 5 to 6 inches in that width. You don't want to take that heavy quarter horse or wider quarter horse tree, which is what the saddle is built on, and put that on an Arabian that might be a little more narrow, or a smaller, POA.
That was my horse. She was an Arabian cross pony.
You need to measure your horse, and don't be drawn to the saddle because it's beautiful. Go measure that saddle. And again, if you're lucky enough to ask a tack store, can I bring my horse in to help me measure?
Wow.
Sometimes they'll let you do that, or you can take it home, put a deposit on, take it home, see if it fits your horse, make sure everything fits. You don't want something big and sloppy on a narrower horse. You're just going to create more problems. You're going to make a horse back sore. You're going to create areas that are going to be rubbed raw. You don't want to do that.
So okay, so every horse has its own saddle, just like every human. Like I'm not being weird right now, but basically every woman has a bra that fits her,
Well, why
right?
don't we talk about shoes?
But you
I
know
wear
what
a
I'm saying?
7.5.
Yeah,
I can't wear an
yeah,
8.5, and I can't wear
yeah.
a 10, and I
There you
can't wear
go.
a 5.
Well done.
Yeah,
Right. You have a profile, and now you go get shoes. Are you long? Like you could be a size 9, right?
right,
And be long, or are you wide?
right.
So
No, we
it's
got
kind
double
of
E's,
that way.
triple E's, right? There's just
Oh, you do so much better than me. I'm such a naughty girl, apparently. But it's kind of true. It's a personal thing. A saddle is important to me, and it also needs to fit the rider themselves. Like that has to fit for them.
that's
Because if
right.
you're not comfortable in it, the horse may be comfortable. You're not comfy. Well, then do you,
Right. There's, that's why it's
what
good.
do you do at that point? Look
Sometimes it's
for,
good to buy a used one because the saddle's already broken
yeah.
in instead of a stiffer brand new one. It just depends, but you've got to fit your horse first, and then you'll fit
Wow.
yourself. And you just need to make sure
Well,
everything's comfortable.
I want to ask, because I'm so excited about today's topic because this was my burning question is how many times do horses just get a saddle because someone got a saddle, get that saddle put on them, the rider gets on it and goes, the horse is misbehaving. Same as a bridle, right?
Mm.
The bridle
Yeah,
and the saddle, those two things,
right.
right? And then the horse gets almost labeled as misbehaving because the horse is uncomfortable as hell. Like, come on. Can we just go to that part because it just, I've seen it happen and people maybe also, if you can't afford to do stuff, maybe don't do it. Like, I'm just being really honest.
It's so
Um,
easy, Lisa. Lisa, there's so much information out there. You can go onto YouTube. You can watch a video on how to fit a saddle to a horse. There's plenty of information out there for people to seek that. And you shouldn't just assume every saddle is going to fit every horse. So learn how to fit a saddle, learn how to take the measurements to make sure it's going to be correct for your horse that you have. And that's how you start to shop. You take your measurements. You try to find saddles. You try different saddles if you can. Again, fitting your horse, trailering that horse into the facility, if that's a possibility, to try different saddles on and then riding them for a little bit.
right. Because
It's,
I've seen some crazy stuff, man. It's just kind of like, I'm not trying to be, negative or anything, but really listen to Christy because your horse may be like, hey, I'm uncomfortable and you're trying to get it to do something.
Well,
And
I tell you what, horses are very forgiving. They're very tolerant, and they're going to tolerate
they
to a
are.
certain point, to then when all of a sudden you wonder why your horse has got this bad attitude and it's resisting this, it's trying to move away from you. This horse is trying to tell you something. So really
Ah,
it's better to prevent that and avoid that by knowing how to fit a saddle properly. By
mm,
getting to the internet, there's plenty of information there. Plus, find a reliable, not reliable, but a trainer and a knowledgeable person that can help you with that. Please ask. There's people out there that can help you with that. Don't just assume everything's just going to fit and everything's going to work.
yeah, that's what I was talking about. People just go like,
Let's
oh, I just
start out on the
adopted
right
this
foot.
horse
Yeah, let's
and
get the
I
horse
just
moving.
adopted this wild horse, and I've got a saddle. I don't need to get a new saddle. And that's a match that is not good. You know what I mean? So that's why I love these podcasts with you so much because I've seen so much stuff in regards. I mean, you've seen the world of it, right? Yeah. I mean, you're a world champion horse trainer. You've seen everything, but I've seen a lot too. And I go like, I can tell that horse is uncomfortable and I don't have the answers. You do. I love that because it's just, the animal has to be comfy. It has to be where it is so
Mhm.
that, if you want to go trail riding, you want to go showing, especially.
Right.
you better make sure that saddle's the right saddle for them. Because if you don't have the right saddle and you want to go show, it ain't gonna happen. You're not gonna have.
Well,
It's
let's
just
go ahead and
it's
avoid a vet bill as well for a horse having a sore back or
yeah.
scald
I'm
area because something doesn't fit. It just you want to avoid all that. And there's
yeah.
no
That's
reason
why
to even go
I
there. There's so much information out there that
I
can help.
know, but it's. I think that but my point is, this is one of these things that get overlooked at times, especially for someone's like, oh, I got a horse. Oh, I got a saddle from my uncle. Let me
Yeah.
just use that. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that's why I'm bringing this up
So the
because,
rigging, which means the leather straps that come down off a saddle, the riggings are also very different depending on maybe what your uncle did with that saddle. Maybe he was a team roper. Maybe he inherited it from his grandfather. And the rigging's very different today than it was 80 years ago. And also the saddle, most saddles have fleecing underneath them. In 80 years, the fleece is probably disintegrated or it's in very poor shape, and you're probably going to need to get that fixed. There's just a lot of things to look at when you're given a
hmm,
saddle. It's great to have family heirlooms, but you need to make sure that it's up to date on a secure rigging. The leather is in good shape. Um, it's
hmm.
just a lot to consider, and you need to have, ask for help. Get an expert to
And
help you with that.
honestly, you know what I used to really enjoy was cleaning the tack, the leather work, polishing it,
Yeah.
taking that time because it, like a guitar, I'm going back to the guitar because it's the same thing. You take care of your instruments. You take care of
Well, that's
this,
true, Lisa. You're making an investment in your horse. You're making an investment in the tack, and you want to take good care of your tack. Leather will last a long, long time.
yes.
Take care of it now. Its worst enemy is dirt and dust. If you drop your reins all the time in the dirt and you stomp on them and then you go hang them up and you never clean them or never oil them, they're eventually going to dry out. Then they're going to break. My gosh, do you want a rain breaking while you're riding your horse down the road? I
No.
don't think
And
so.
it can crack and do
So,
that. Yeah. Yeah.
it's a simple fix with a cover. You cover your saddle when you're finished. Every time that saddle gets on the saddle rack, it should be covered. And you want to oil it at least 4 times a year, if not more often, depending on the climate that you're in. Rain
Mm,
can harm it just as much as the dryness can harm it. So take good
mm.
care of your gear; it'll last forever. Pretty close,
And leathers, it really does, right?
right?
So can we go to bits? Let's talk about bits
Yeah.
because I mean, I don't know if this is my age group now, but again, me aging back to the day of when we had horses, but, um, I, I, bits can be pretty, what is, I mean, are the metal bits okay or not? Like, can I just go there? Let me just ask that because
Well, every bit I
I,
think is pretty much going to
yeah,
be metal, except some that are wrapped with some rubber
okay,
on
wrapped
the
around with that
mouthpieces.
rubber,
And
right?
let's just try to simplify this a little bit. Not every this just like the saddle fitting, not every bit is going to fit every horse. And when I say
Mm,
fit, meaning how they respond to the bit. So there are bits out there that are more harsh or have more construction. I'm trying to figure out a way to say this, but uh, there's more metal in the mouthpiece. There could be rollers. There could be extra height to the mouthpiece of the bit. And then they can simplify things. They can be smooth. They can be twisted. They can break in the middle like a snaffle. They have shanks, which are different than just the rings on the side. And they all have a different purpose of control and communication with your horse. So that's something that you have to know about the horse you're buying. Hopefully the person you're buying this from is going to educate you and tell you what type of bit has been used on this horse. And you'll be riding this horse to try it out. And you'll say, oh my gosh, this horse is really responsive. This is really great. I don't need to consider anything else. Maybe they'll sell you that bridle with the horse. If not, you take a picture of it and say, gosh, the horse was very responsive to this. I'm going to take my picture down to the local tack store and I'm going to get the same thing. But then there's
mm,
other things that happen, and there are people that have had horses for years that are not knowledgeable. And let's say they just use the same bit because that's the bit that was in that horse's mouth when they bought it, or they bought one at a yard sale or a swap meet, or somebody recommended something and maybe it's too much bit. The horse doesn't need that much, or it's not enough. That's where a trainer comes in. You've got to know what works best for your horse. It's great to have multiple bits that you can try if you're unsure about what to use on your horse, to have an expert come out and help you find out what it works best for this horse. You can actually ruin a horse's mouth, or you can enhance it and preserve a horse's mouth depending on the type of bit you put in it.
So, and the bit can change according to the bridle, right? I mean, you can have a bridle and then change the bit up or not. I'm trying to remember that.
Yeah, so there are Western style bridles, there are Western style bits. There are English style bridles and there are English style bits. There's a little bit of a crossover when you're starting to train a young horse in the snaffle bit, and the snaffle bit can be used English and Western, even endurance riding or trail riding. It just depends on how your horse responds. So, you know, I've had this, I've had a lot of experience in the last 4 years of dealing with horses and bits and people and what they understand and what they don't. And there's different philosophies, and there's some groups of people that think every horse should be in a ring snaffle, a smooth ring snaffle, and not every horse is going to respond well to that. So that's just one example. Let's say we put a smooth ring snaffle in a horse's mouth and you go out for a ride and you go to ask your horse to stop and you say, whoa, and you sit back and you say, whoa, and the horse keeps going. So that's your first indicator that, gee, my horse might not have a very soft mouth, may not be listening to this particular bit that I have in this horse's mouth. Does it throw its head up? Does it tuck its nose and respond nicely to you? That's something that you need to discern when you're a rider. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with changing up that snaffle. There's different degrees of snaffle. There's thickness. There's different twists that help you understand, that help the horse feel what you're asking it to do. So, you know, you can put any bit in somebody's hands, and if that person isn't experienced, any bit can become harsh. And maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's about in the wrong hands can create a hard mouth. A different bit in light hands can create harmony. So why would
how you handle it too? How you're doing.
So why would you want to keep? Yeah. Here's my example. Why do you want to keep yanking and pulling on a bit when a horse doesn't respond to it? All you're going to do is create more problems. You're going to create resistance, and you're not going to have that harmony and that responsiveness to your horse. So, you know, you might want to change up a few things of what you're doing. That's where the trainer comes in. Again, there's a lot of information on the internet, but honestly, if you want to learn, get with a trainer I mean, you can walk into my tack room and you're probably going to see 20 different bits.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to see what
I know we're going to see different on how they respond to that. And we find that the horse is happy, the rider develops a soft touch, and there's harmony and responsiveness and communication, and you two understand each other. That's what
I remember our horse, you know, Cinnabar, my little girl, she like metal, no, she wanted the chewy, and we had to go through a whole process of this. I mean, and she was a rescue horse, and it was crazy, you know, it was like a whole process, but it was about patience and time. And until she was happy, I knew I was just going to keep getting bucked off or whatever. You know, it's like, and the same thing as the saddle. The saddle needed to fit her. That's, you know, so I think the bridle and the saddle, aren't those just really important that is the right fit for the horse? Out of today's discussion, it really is important because your horse will pretty much let you know, I'm not happy, but you have to be aware of when the horse is telling you.
Well, that's right.
Am I right on that?
They tolerate an awful lot. So I see this a lot, even judging a lot of horse shows in open shows where people are just starting and gosh, you really want to help. That's why we're doing this podcast. We're trying to help the beginners and people getting started with horses to understand this. But you can, people need to know how a bridle has to fit. It's got to be up there in the corner of that horse's mouth.
Oh,
it can't be lower than that. And some people don't even put a chin strap on a bit that has shanks, which doesn't make any sense because the The shanks help enhance the pressure from the chin strap to control that horse. And again, you can have a very soft hand, and having all this, these types of bits, you just have to understand how things fit.
And are all of this is going to be different for when you show versus, hey, I'm going on a ride in my backwoods, kind of thing.
Well, yes and no. It's the showing is obviously probably more steps above than just, your trail ride, but your trail ride has to be successful as well. And you want a horse that you know that you can control on the trail. And, honestly, folks, when you leave that arena, that show arena, or just your warm-up arena, or your schooling arena, and you're out there in the open, you don't know what's going to cross your path on that trail. So you need to know that you've got a bit that might be in the horse's mouth to where you're going to feel secure. You can stop that horse in an emergency. It's really important to
That's
know all
huge.
that. So that's where you go back to the classroom, which is the arena, and experiment with these different bits to find out which one your horse responds to the best, and you're going to feel the most secure. It's like spurs. We're going to talk about spurs briefly.
Let's talk about that.
I ride constantly with a spur on my heel, and
Wow.
I may never use it because I want to be prepared, and especially on my Chief Joe ride that you and I have talked about. I've got to be prepared on a 3,500 foot drop off the side of a cliff to know I can put my leg softly on that horse, and my horse will yield to that pressure and move away from that cliff and keep us safe. So I don't ride without spurs. I know how to use them. I know how to ride without them, but it's like having a Jake brake on a big, large truck. I've got an extra brake that's going to stop that truck at 45 miles an hour or 65 miles an hour in an emergency. Those spurs are there to enhance my ride to make sure that we're going to be safe. And I know
Not in it, like, I know, honestly, like the others, it goes back to the decor item of spurs and everything, right? Which is great and fun, but it doesn't mean that spurs are not your control over your horse. And I've seen that kind of thing too. So the spur is like what you just said, this extra gear. You're really lucky to have it. And do you do training on that with people? Do you help them understand how to use spurs?
Yes. Our riders, our more intermediate riders are the ones that will learn how to use a spur and see the benefit of having a spur, a blunt spur. We're not talking about big round vaquero spurs. We're talking about even blunt English spurs are a great tool to enhance your heel in communication with a cue. We call it a cue, asking that horse to possibly side pass over to a gate or walk over a log, or again, move that horse's body over just slightly on the side of a hill. So it's something that you train ahead of time. You just don't throw them on and say, okay, I'm going to go ride today. And I've never used spurs and I never know how my horse is going to respond to that. You need to know they're on your heels at all times. They're there if you need them to keep both you and your horse safe. So your balance has to be good. Your leg cues have to be good. You have to have an understanding of how your horse is going to respond to that spur.
I love this conversation. And hey, everyone, go to Christy's website because you know what? If you're wondering about all of this, contact her through her website, send an email through there and ask questions. We'll answer them on the shows too. So go to her website. It's wdnhorse.com. Are you ready for that? So just say, but I think these are such, we never know what's going to happen when we get into these topics, right? But I think it's so important. Spurs, have we covered it all, Christy? I think we did.
I think we did.
But there's always, I think we did even more. But at the end of the day, it's about care and love of your horse and putting in the time to learn more as much as you can. Like what Christy is saying, do that due diligence. It'll save you money in the long run. And, you will have a better relationship with your horse, right, Christy?
That's right. You'll have peace of mind and you're going to have just the word's harmony.
I love harmony.
Yeah, you want to have a nice ride with your horse and just enjoy everything that's happening. But you also have to be prepared. You need to know how your horse is going to respond. That's why we practice in the classroom, which is the arena. You practice these elements of reins and bits and saddles and spurs so that when you leave that arena to go enjoy God's country out there, and there's some beautiful country out there to be riding your horse through, you're going to be prepared. I mean, I've had Dollar, my wonderful horse who's in the book Hoof Prints Across Time, a trail ride to remember, carried me through 1,300 mile trail ride. And I needed to know how we're going to respond to this. Dollar has alerted me to a bear and a rattlesnake. So all of a sudden you come up to that on the trail. If you need to quickly move your horse to a safer position, that's why I have those spurs on, and it doesn't take much. I don't have to jab her. I just lay my leg on her side with a light little tap of that spur. She's going to respond instantly, and we're both going to be safe. That's how I look at spurs. It keeps us both safe.
Spur, and it's not about like a hunky cowboy, but sometimes it can be. I'm just saying. Can we listen? Like, come on. We want the spurs. If you're in a, you know what I'm saying. Come on. I remember being in a town in Texas. It's like it is the cowboy town of Texas, the one.
Yes.
And Bandera. And I was photographing their, they have an amazing courthouse, and we do stories on courthouses and stuff because it's interesting. It's part of a formulation of a city, right? Is when you get a courthouse. And all kinds, I don't know any courthouse that hasn't been burned down or moved or something. But anyway, I'm out there photographing this, and they're like, this is the cowboy capital, right, of Texas, right? And this because they were running cattle all the way from the north down through here. And lo and behold, I turn around and there are truckloads of true cowboys driving by me. And I went, okay, that was a sweet look for the day. I'm just saying. And now, are they all wearing spurs? I don't know, because all I saw was a bunch of beautiful faces with, hats on. But cowboys wear spurs because, hell, yeah, you go out in Texas and you're going to herd cattle, you're going to wear spurs at that point because you will come up on those rattlesnakes you're talking about. I have a friend who has a ranch out in West Texas, and her family they have one of the oldest cattle ranches out there. And she's an amazing artist. Everyone, Alice Lease, look her up. She's amazing. I mean, she's an incredible artist, right? And at one point she had to go up to make phone calls, go up on their windmill tower to make the phone call to do podcasts with us. Seriously. But she will not do ATVs to round up the cattle. She uses her horses. Mm-hmm. And you're going to tell me, and she uses guinea fowl because they take out the rattlesnakes. But I guarantee you she's wearing spurs because you're out in Texas in rattlesnake country.
I'm sure all the cowboys out there that are riding the range and they're gathering cattle and they're branding cattle, they're going to be wearing spurs. They need to move those horses quickly to follow the cow. Hopefully the horse has a lot of cow sense as well, and they're bred to do that. But there's a quick response that has to happen in order to keep that cow safe or to get that particular cow and rope it. So the spurs just enhance their leg communication with that horse. Mm. You need to ask that horse for just a little more energy. And I'm sure
it's like, hello, I really mean it. It's like, I really mean it
now.
I
need it now.
So what about Chief Joseph? Where did spurs even come into play in history? I know we're going over time, but like really, when you think about it, Chief Joseph, when
I'll be real honest with you, I haven't seen many Indians that ever wore spurs. Most of them were also riding more bareback, so their communication with their legs was a lot closer to their horse than we are in a Western saddle. And they practice. Indians also practiced with their horses. They played a lot of games with those horses. They practiced their skills for running down buffalo, for being able to shoot off of their horses with bows and arrows. They practiced a lot, and they kept those legs really, really close, and they had good communications with those horses.
See, you have a thing about, Chief Joseph, which I admire. I have a thing about Shaka Zulu in South Africa, where, lived a lot of my life as a kid. And he taught his warriors to take their shoes off. No shoes, you're running over hot coals. No, this is not Tony Robbins, okay? But running over hot coals, you're running over thorns so that you could really outrun the British. And it was like you be one with nature, which they already were. So they already had a heads up, but the British had ammunition, right? So he did that, and he had this amazing battle strategy, and he circled them like a buffalo. If you look at a buffalo or a bison in this country, it is like it's a huge, it's one of the most famous battle maneuvers back in the day, right? So it's like the British would all sit in a little area with their little tents and everything, and they would surround them. So you look at a bison in this country, but in Africa we had buffalo, would be this very round circular thing, and he would surround and attack. It was amazing what he did as a battle strategy. And I think him and Chief Joseph, in a way, were very, we're going for it. They really did. They did everything they could do and thought and really understood how to do these how to practice, like what you just said, practice with your horses. Over in South Africa at that point, they weren't using horses. They were on their feet. If they could have met, that would have been good. But, that communication is so crucial between humans and horses. You're going to have a horse, have that time. We've talked about it before on a show. So I just think about spurs and warfare. So going back to that real quick before we go, look at all the wars horses have fought in, right? Over the years. From Chief Joseph down, even the Civil War and everything, they have been, I know we've talked about this on shows before, the military had spurs then? I don't know when spurs came about.
Yeah, the cavalry did. Yes, the cavalry. Yes, that's one of the collector's items that people like to get, are they're blunt English spurs, and they actually say U.S. on the side of them. The cavalry had those 200 years ago. Probably even longer than that.
Wow.
But, really the bottom line is just practice with your horse, get to know your horse well.
Yeah.
Some horses may not need the spur for communication. Some of them are on the lazy side and they just need that extra little reminder. And that's why blunt spurs are great. They don't have to be big round spurs. Just practice. You need to know how your horse is going to respond. If you really want to enjoy that horse in or out of the arena, practice and get to know how they're going to react and communicate with them, and you'll have harmony.
Yeah. Awesome. Everyone, stay tuned. We'll be back next month every time. It's every second Saturday here on Big Blend Radio. Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome, Lisa. Thank you, everybody. Write into me. I'd love to hear from you, and we'll talk some more.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's ABCs of Horses featuring Christy Wood. You can keep up with Christy and learn more about her services and her books by going to her website, wdnhorse.com. Keep up with Big Blend Radio at bigblendradio.com.